Now that I have my board finished, there's several pieces. You got 11 horses, you got a deck of cards, you got some dice, and so rather than just have them put away in a bag or something and scratched up or lost, I thought I'd make a little box here to store all my stuff. And so put this little box together from scrap and open up the lid, and you can see place for all the horses. I got a place there for the dice and 2 decks of cards. This has a nice little wooden hinge on it. I know Rob Cosman is the one that promotes the wooden hinge. I really like that, and I've used it on my boxes whenever I could. And so I'm gonna make a couple of videos then to show you how I made this box, and if you're interested in the box, then watch my videos. One of the first pieces to make in the box to hold all of the horses is this piece right here. And this is going to hold all of the horses upright, when they're stored away. So the first question I came up with was, what is all of the spacing here? On my horses, game pieces, from the nose to the hoof is about 3 1/4, maybe 3 1/2 inches. So I needed to come up with a spacing for this first row that was not going to bump into the back wall of the box, and then have enough room up here in the front that I could put make a dado for the dice. So here's what I came up with then. So this is going to be, this board is going to be a 1/2 inch thick and 4 1/2 inches, 4 1/4 inches, 4 1/8 inches wide. And so this spacing with the first hole is a 1/2 inches off of the side of the board, then a 5/8 inch spacing between each of these. That'll give you 6 horses on this row. Then I came up 2 inches, so 2 inches from the back of the board is my first row, and another 2 inches, and then that leaves the remainder here of this total board, which is 6 1/2 inches from the front to the back. Leaves space that I can put my dado in here for the dice. So going back to my second row then of horses and drilled holes. So I came 7/8 inch off of the side for the first hole here, then 5/8 across. That gives me 5 horses on the front row, 6 on the back, so 11 total. Then on this, so I'll show you here. You can see there's plenty of space between the horses here, and so they don't bump each other when they're all put in place. All right, and then so with this 2 1/2 inches here in front of this horse, I can make my dado right here, and that dado is 5/8 inch wide, and I just made it 1/4 inch deep, and that's where I will put my dice. I'll put those in here. A card package, a card kit that I purchased had 5 dice in it. If you remember on my previous video, the horses sit on a 2 inch post, and that post is 2 inches below the horse. So it's up inside the horse, maybe 3/8 or 1/4 inch. All right, so this is a 1/2 inch thick board here. And this piece right here now, I cut at 1 inch thick. So with this 1 inch thick piece, when these horses sit in here, they sit in here pretty straight with the back hoof just kind of touching the board. That keeps them nice and straight across there, and keeps them even. So another question that I came up with was, well, what size hole do I make? The post on my horses are 3/16. If you remember, these horses are 1/4 inch wide, and so a 3/16 post goes inside there. Easily, if you're careful, you can drill the hole straight. So I tested a 7/32 inch hole and a 13/64. The 7/32 inch hole to me was too wide. There was too much wobble in it. So I elected 13/64. That's what these holes are here. And you can see it's easy to, the horses easily move around in that, but it's still enough that it holds them upright. So let me go back over this one more time then. So this board right here is 6.5 inches long. I came in 2 inches off of the back right here to drill the first hole. I went up another 2 inches to drill the first hole. That leaves me space in here for a 5/8 inch dado that I can cut for the dice. The second part of the box that I made is for a deck of cards. So I measured a deck of cards and came up with this idea. My original box, I actually had 2 decks of cards, and so I made 2 of these holders. But I've added one here, it's a 1/4 inch wide here, just so you could put the rules of the game. You can print those out and just fold it up and maybe put it inside here. Or you could perhaps take the jokers and some of the cards that you don't use and put them in here. Anyway, when I measured everything, and you probably need to measure your own card deck, but I came up with the deck of being 13/16 inches wide or thick. And so I made 1/8 of an inch sides. So here's 2 sides, 1/8 of an inch. And then I had spacers in here that are 13/16. And this apparently measures 2 5/8 inch wide for a deck of cards. Again, you might want to take your own measurements. So at 3/4 of an inch here and a 3/4 of an inch post here that these 2 sides are glued to should leave you a 2 5/8 inch wide space by 13/16 thick. And then I just made this right here 1/4 of an inch on each side with a third 1/8 inch side, which will be, I glued these pieces to the bottom. I just added glue to the bottom and glued them into the box. So I didn't do a lot of gluing on the sides or anything like that. And so then you wind up with this, and now you can take this measurement here and start to work on your sides. I had some nice tiger maple that I wanted to use up there, just cut off ends that I wanted to use for the box. I really like that. And with a walnut interior, the contrasting woods really look neat. So I went ahead and made the sides on this. I cut them at 45s. And that was one of the issues that I had, and the reason why I took the measurement inside here from these 2 pieces. I took this measurement so I could make these cuts on these on the sides. So the 45, obviously this inside corner right here has to be roughly this measurement that's inside here everywhere. So that I really couldn't determine that without making this, cutting 145, placing it up against the end of there, marking it, and then making all of the cuts. So that's the way I did that. Now, 45s are pretty difficult to make and really get them flush. So one of the things that you can do, and I may even do on this one, is I can take my my saw blade, which is a flat tooth ground, and cut a 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch dado in here, and then fill that then with a 1/8 inch piece, glue all that in. So that will give me a little bit of glue strength on these edges. Plus, if there's a gap on your 45, it will fill that in. And if you have a contrasting wood, that actually looks pretty sharp. So it all came together pretty well. I'll show you the bottom on this. So up from the, so this piece right here is measuring 4 inches width. I cut this dado, that's 1/8 inch by wide by 3/16 inch deep, and it's 1/4 inch up off of the bottom. And that then the bottom fits into that. But you can see all of the pieces. I'll glue these down, and see how I put all the pieces in there to get my proper measurements. So I think that's about it. I will glue these sides up, and then we'll go to the making the top. And I may not glue all of the sides just yet, because the top is going to be a top like Rob Cosman has made, that doesn't have a hinge. Let me take that back. It doesn't have a brass hinge, and you use the material from the wood, and it actually blends right in. It makes a great hinge. I've done it a couple of times, and I'm going to do it again on this one, that the top will sit on there, and it will look like, when everything's closed up, it will look like you don't have a hinge. So we'll work on that next. It's a pretty neat little project, and we'll continue on until we finish. I just cut the side and the top for the hinge, and so I have a 3/8 inch bit here in my router, and the height on this bit is going to be just a little bit less, and I mean like a 32nd or 64th less than 3/16. That would be half of 3/8. And it's just off-centered, so the hinge will actually be to the more toward the rear of the side, and that way that will give you the chance to plane off this area right here that's sticking over. You can plane this off flat and flush with the side. So here's the side. I've already cut the top. So if I look at this hinge, and this hinge will be cut into sections now, but if I put these together, you would be able to see a nice, nice look. Once that hinge is put together and flattened off, it'll be a nice look for the side and the top of my box. When making the hinge for the box, it's going to be wooden hinge, and in essence, we're going to try to make it invisible from the back. And so to do this, you have to match the wood of the sides of the box. So if you would make the box out of walnut or cherry, you should be able to buy 3/8 inch dowels and cut them. But in my case, I've taken I usually cut these about a 32nd larger than the 3/8 inch I'm going to use, or even if I'm, let's say making a 1/4 inch dowel, then just a little bit fat, so that when it comes out, it generally comes out right on the money. So one of the things I do here is try to make a rounded end here to go up inside my cutter, and then I just knock off the edges of this square piece, so it hopefully will not shatter as it goes through. So I'm just going to kind of grab that with my sandpaper and just knock off those edges just a little, especially here on the end where I can get this nice and round. All right. So let's just take it here and see if we can run this thing through. Also, the length of this is not as long as I've seen on some of the videos. I've had problems with this tiger maple splitting out because too much tension gets on it from this end as it's going through the cutter. So this should be plenty long enough anyway for our hinge. So let's see if we can get it started and work this through. Okay, let's check it and see how well we did as far as the thickness goes. Okay, that's pretty close to 3/8 inch thick. I don't know if you can see that, but that's right on 3/8 inch. One of the things I'll show you here, this flat edge right here was the side that was actually 3/8 of an inch. And so I left this, this wound up being flat here. I don't have a problem with this though, because once we install our hinge, this is going to be flattened off to the sides and to the top anyway. So I'm okay with this, but I'd prefer that I'd had a nice round dowel here. So we'll go to the next process, and that will be cutting this in the lengths and putting a dowel, metal dowel in these so we can have a hinge that will open up our lid. All right, now that I've cut for my hinge piece, what I've done now is to mark off. I like to use 5 pieces, and I think as long as it's an odd number, you can use any number of pieces for your hinge. In my case, 5. I've marked off evenly 5 spaces across here, and let me just tell you guys, this measured off 9 1/16. To divide that by 5, I just find so difficult. So I measured these off. I'm going to start using millimeters. By measuring these off in millimeters, it just was so much easier. I think this year I'm going to buy probably a 12 or 24 inch, let's say, ruler with the metrics on it, and start moving in that direction. Anyway, so I've marked off here the 5 places for the different hinge parts. The X's here, and notice this is the top, so these are marked also to match up with these. So X's go in here where I'm going to not put glue, okay? So this piece would be glued, this piece glued, this piece glued, and then the opposite then on the top. So this piece will not be glued, and this piece will be glued. And by gluing these, here I'll put, I marked, what I did was I marked this long dowel that I cut yesterday. I marked that so I could keep the consistency of the grain. So that's piece number 1, piece number 2, turn this around, piece number 2, etc. And if you remember from yesterday, this dowel here didn't quite cut round, so it has this flat spot on the edge, which I will leave on this forward edge right here, and that'll just mean I have less to shave off when I cut these flush with the back of the back and flush with the top edge, with the back edge of the top. So going across here though, I've lined these up. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pieces. Okay, so all the grains will be lined up. And I like to use these 2 as the glue to the top, these 3 then to glue to the bottom. And I really don't think it matters if the odd ones are top or bottom. But the next step on this now will be to put in the the metal pin that's going to be the hinge between each of these. And there's a trick I came up with to help you get that centered, because if that's not centered, if that pin's not centered here all the way across, and then your hinge is going to jam on you and might bust out the glue. The hinges, the metal wire that I'm going to use for the hinge is a piece of wiring that I pulled out of my yard where the electrical company or the cable company put in their little flags. Once they get finished, they just leave these in your yard. And so this is a pretty strong piece of wire. I measured it, and it measures exactly a 1/16 of an inch. So I have a drill bit that's a 1/16 of an inch that I'm going to use to drill in the little hinge pieces, the little dowels. And I've used this once before. This is very good material to use as in our hinge. One of the most important things in making your hinge for your box is to get the metal piece that the hinge is actually turning on centered in your dowels. And so that's fairly difficult. I do have a drill press, but to get that 1/16 inch drill bit centered is pretty hard. And so what I did, I devised this little jig here. So I made this, whatever this dimension is, let's just say 1 1/4, but it fits in my chuck, and I know the depth of it, and so I could cut in my 3/8 inch depth to roughly, not all the way through. You don't want to go all the way through, but let's say within 1/4 of an inch of the back. Drill that in, replace this bit then with my 1/16 inch bit, and finish drilling all the way through. So now I have a 1/16 inch hole that's centered on my dowel. The next important step in making this hinge is to be sure I have this drilled into my dowel and it's right in the center. So we just made this piece here on the lathe, and my dowel fits up in there, and this piece right here now is actually 2 pieces, so they will slide together and tighten down on the dowel. And these are leftover pieces I had from cutting the side or the top on my box. So by placing the dowel in here and then pushing these sides together and then tightening down on my clamp, as you can see, I can now center my 1/16 inch drill bit. Where is it? Right there. I can center that on this hole, and I will wind up with a hole that's, if not in the center, it is very close to the center. And the ones I've made so far have worked pretty well. So that's the trick, I think, to really making your hinge work. The wooden hinges are cut now, and so I probably have about 1/4 of an inch hole inside here. These are lining up fairly well, and if you remember, this dowel in particular had the kind of a flat edge on it. So again, that's going to be turned to the outside, so I can just flatten that off. There's not an issue. They lined up pretty well. There was a little, because these didn't turn out, they were about a 1/64 less than 3/8, and so there was a little wobble to them, but now putting them all together, they're working out fine. So I'll glue my hinge down, and I'll show you exactly how I'm doing that, and we'll put the lid on and glue that all down, and we'll see if it works. Okay, I've just applied the glue here to the box for the hinge, and I think I told you that Rob Cosman was the one that he has a video on putting this wooden hinge on here, and he recommended that you put petroleum jelly, let's say at every one of these markers where there's a transition between the dowel from the bottom and the dowel from the top. So also mark the X's where you don't want the glue, and that way you won't get mixed up. So there's glue here, here, and here wherever there's not an X, and then where there's an X up here, there is not glue. So this, once I get my dowel, and here's my dowel now that I have, you know, with the pins in it. So I'm going to put them together, put the lid on top, clamp it down, and let it dry, and we'll see if it works. I took the clamps off of my top early this morning, and I'll zoom in here. You can see that there's just a little bit of that dowel sticking out on the back of the box here. So I'll trim that down flush with the top and the side and give that a slick look. And let's just check to see if the hinge is working. All right, appears to be working. So thank goodness for that. All right, I'm going to finish this off with shellac, and we'll call this good. One of the reasons, if you remember in the previous video, of lowering the router bit that cuts this 1/8 inch, you know, when you wind up with a 3/16 and a 3/16, it's a 3/8 inch dowel. One of the reasons for lowering the bit just a little is that you leave a small gap right here in between the top and the side. And so I don't really see a gap in there much, so this is laying down just exactly the way I wanted it to. But I have finished the box. I've got a nice shiny shellac finish on that. And as you can see, the box opens up. You get a nice, I like that walnut contrasting there with the tiger maple. And so, guys, I think I finished the project and it turned out pretty well. I hope you'll consider this build, and maybe I'll talk to you later on another project of some kind.